She had always loved the sound of music. From the time she was very small, she would sit in the corner of the living room listening to the old piano her mother kept and let her fingers move along the keys, even if she did not know all the notes. Music was her escape. It was the one thing in the world that made her feel safe and free, a place where she could breathe without fear or worry. But the world outside the music was not always kind to her. In school, she was quiet and gentle. She did not shout or try to draw attention, and most of the other students did not notice her much. That made her an easy target for teasing. Some classmates thought it was fun to point out every little mistake she made. They laughed at her clothes, the way she walked, even the way she held her books. At first, she tried to ignore them, thinking it was just something children did. But over time, their words began to sting. She started to feel small, like she was invisible and unimportant. Her love for music grew even as the teasing became harder to bear. Every day after school, she would rush to the old piano in her house and play. Sometimes she played softly, almost whispering the notes to herself. Other times, when no one was around, she would pound the keys with all her heart, letting the music carry out her sadness and frustration. Music was the only place where she could be herself. Her family noticed her love for the piano. Her mother would sometimes peek into the room and smile quietly when she heard her playing. She never interrupted, because she knew the girl needed her music as much as she needed air. Her father, though busy with work, tried to encourage her too. He would tell her, "Keep playing. One day people will hear you and they will understand." She wanted to believe him, but deep inside, the hurt from school made it hard to trust the words. At school, the teasing was never just words. Sometimes they would knock her books out of her hands or push her slightly when she walked by. One day during lunch, a group of students snatched her notebook and wrote unkind messages all over it. She had tried to laugh it off at first, but inside she felt crushed. The one thing she wanted to do was disappear, hide somewhere no one could find her. She thought about stopping music. If she just stopped playing, maybe they would leave her alone. But the thought of giving up the piano made her chest ache. The piano had been her companion since she was little. It knew her secrets. It had heard her dreams and her tears. How could she let the world take that away from her? So she kept playing even when it hurt. Even when her heart felt heavy, she would press her fingers to the keys and let the music flow. One afternoon, her music teacher noticed her talent. The teacher asked her to stay after class one day, just the two of them, to play a few pieces. At first, she was nervous. What if she made a mistake? What if she embarrassed herself? But when she sat down at the piano in the empty classroom, everything else seemed to disappear. The notes came naturally, almost as if the piano itself was guiding her hands. The teacher listened quietly, nodding with a gentle smile. "You have a gift," she said softly. "Do not let anyone tell you otherwise." Those words stayed with her even when the teasing continued. Still, every day at school felt like walking through a storm. She would see the same faces, laughing, whispering, pointing. She learned to lower her gaze, to keep her head down, and to hurry from one class to another. Her friends were few, but there were a couple who stood by her side. They would sit with her at lunch sometimes or share a smile in the hallway. Small acts of kindness that made a difference. She treasured those moments, knowing they were rare and precious. She began to notice something in herself during these difficult days. Every time someone teased her, a part of her wanted to shrink. But another part, the part that loved music, wanted to fight back. Not with words, not with anger, but with action. She wanted to show that she was more than the whispers and laughter. She wanted to show them her heart, her passion in the only way she knew how, through the piano. Evenings at home became her sanctuary. She would practice for hours, learning new pieces, repeating the same passage over and over until it felt right. She imagined herself performing in front of a crowd, not to prove them wrong, but to show the truth of who she was. She pictured the notes rising into the air, carrying with them her courage, her hope, and her dreams. In these moments, she felt powerful. She felt alive. Sometimes she would stumble, feeling frustrated when a difficult piece would not sound right. Her fingers would falter, hitting wrong notes, her heart sinking with every mistake. But then she would take a deep breath, close her eyes, and begin again. Each mistake became a lesson. Each wrong note taught her patience, persistence, and resilience. Slowly, she began to realize that music was not just an escape. It was her strength, her voice, her way to face the world that had been cruel to her. Her parents began to notice the change too. They saw how her eyes would light up when she spoke about music. how she carried herself a little taller after a good practice session. Her mother would say, "See, you are stronger than you think." Her father would nod, proud, telling her, "The world may not understand you yet, but one day they will." At school, the teasing never fully stopped. Some students continued to make fun of her, but others began to notice her determination. Her quiet courage inspired a few to smile at her, to offer small gestures of friendship. She began to understand that people were often afraid of those who were different, and that the ones who were kind were usually the ones who saw the real person inside. One day, the school announced a talent show. The news spread like wildfire, and almost immediately the teasing intensified. "You play in front of everyone? That's funny." Some students laughed. Others whispered behind her back, questioning why she would even try. Her heart pounded at the thought of standing on a stage with everyone watching. She wanted to run and hide, but she also felt a spark inside her, a spark that had grown stronger with every hour she spent at the piano. She thought of the music teacher's words, "You have a gift. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise." And she thought of the quiet nights at home, her fingers dancing across the keys, filling the room with sound. That music was her truth. That music was her courage. Slowly, a decision formed in her mind. She would play. She would face her fears. And she would do it not to prove anyone wrong, but to prove to herself that she could. In the days leading up to the talent show, she practiced even more intensely. She learned to control her nervousness, to focus on the music instead of the audience. She imagined herself on stage, not as the girl who was teased, but as the girl who loved music. The girl who had a dream too big to be silenced. Every note she played carried with it her heart, her struggles, and her hopes for the future. At home, her parents watched her progress with pride. They could see the girl who had been timid and uncertain begin to stand taller. "You are ready," her mother said one evening as she helped adjust the music sheets on the piano. "No matter what happens, remember why you play." Her father nodded. "It is your passion, and no one can take that from you." Those words wrapped around her like a warm blanket, giving her comfort and courage. The first part of her journey had been full of challenges. She had faced teasing, loneliness, and self-doubt, but through it all she had not given up. Music had been her companion, her teacher, and her friend. It had helped her grow stronger in ways she had never imagined. And now, standing on the edge of a new chapter, she felt a mix of fear and excitement. She did not know what the talent show would bring, but she knew one thing for sure. She would play. And she would play with everything in her heart. Her journey was just beginning. The girl who had been teased, the girl who had felt small and invisible, was slowly learning to find her voice through music. And though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. She was no longer just a silent listener. She was a young musician, ready to face the world, note by note, with courage in her heart and music in her soul. The news of the school talent show spread quickly through the hallways. Posters were taped to the walls. Teachers made announcements in the classrooms, and whispers floated from one group of students to another. Excitement and nerves hung in the air like a heavy cloud, and for the girl, every announcement made her heart beat faster. The thought of performing in front of everyone was both thrilling and terrifying. She had spent years hiding her talent, practicing quietly at home, and avoiding the harsh words of those who did not understand her. Now the world seemed to expect her to step into the spotlight, to show what she could do, and the fear of failure pressed heavily against her chest. She remembered the teasing, the laughter, and the looks of doubt she had endured for so long. She wondered if she was truly ready. What if she made a mistake? What if the audience laughed at her like the others had before? Despite the fear, a spark inside her refused to go out. She remembered the nights when her fingers had danced across the piano keys, the long hours of practice, and the moments when she felt pure joy as the notes filled the room. Music had been her refuge, her companion, and her voice when the world would not listen. That love for music pushed her forward. She could not let fear stop her from sharing what she loved. At home, she spent hours preparing. She practiced every piece she could remember, carefully going over difficult passages again and again. She worked to perfect her timing, her expression, and her touch on the keys. Sometimes she would play a section over and over until it sounded just right, her fingers aching and her back stiff from sitting too long. but every note brought her closer to the confidence she needed. She began to feel that the music was no longer just an escape. It was her armor, protecting her from the doubts that tried to creep in. Her parents noticed the dedication in her practice. They offered quiet encouragement, giving her words of advice and gentle reminders that she was capable. "Remember, it is not about what others think," her mother said one evening, smoothing the sheet music on the piano. "It is about how you feel when you play." Her father added, "You have worked hard for this moment. Trust yourself." Those words wrapped around her like a soft blanket, calming some of the nerves that threatened to overwhelm her. At school, the reactions were mixed. Some students could not hide their surprise when they heard she might perform. A few whispered among themselves, expressing disbelief. "She? On stage? That will be something to watch," they said with smirks. Others, however, seemed genuinely curious. They had seen her play in music class or heard her practicing in the music room, and a small part of them wanted to see what she could do. She tried to avoid paying too much attention to the whispers, focusing instead on her music. Every day she would find quiet moments in the music room, practicing when no one else was around. She imagined the audience not as critics or classmates, but as people who might hear her heart through the piano. Each time she played, she felt her confidence grow, like a tiny flame that would not be extinguished. Even with preparation, doubts would creep in. There were moments when she would sit at the piano and struggle with a passage that refused to sound right. Her fingers would stumble, hitting wrong notes, and frustration would bubble up inside her. She sometimes wanted to throw the music sheets across the room and give up. But she took a deep breath and remembered why she played. The music was not just about perfection. It was about expression, about sharing a part of herself with the world. That thought was enough to keep her going. Her music teacher played an important role during this time. They would listen to her practice, offering guidance and encouragement. "Do not focus on the mistakes," the teacher said one day, leaning over to adjust her hand position. "Feel the music. Let it flow from your heart." The girl listened carefully, trying to absorb every word. The teacher's confidence in her abilities reminded her that she had talent, and that talent deserved to be shared. As the day of the talent show approached, anxiety grew. The hallways buzzed with students rehearsing lines, practicing songs, and boasting about what they would do. Some of the teasing students began making remarks again, this time directly about the talent show. "She will probably mess up," one student whispered. "Everyone will laugh," another added. She could hear the words but tried not to let them sink in. Instead, she focused on what she could control: her practice, her expression, and her courage. To prepare mentally, she created a routine. Each day, she would sit quietly before practice, taking deep breaths and imagining herself on stage. She pictured the piano in front of her, the lights shining down and the audience watching. Instead of thinking of them as critics, she imagined them as listeners, people who might hear her story through the music. This mental rehearsal helped her face the fear that had been growing inside her for so long. Her evenings were spent in the quiet of her room, playing and replaying her pieces until she could feel the music inside her, not just under her fingers. She practiced different emotions, learning how to make the piano express joy, sadness, and hope. With each practice session, her connection to the music deepened and a new confidence began to emerge. She realized that no matter what happened on stage, the music was hers, and it was beautiful. Her parents noticed the transformation. The girl, who had once been timid and uncertain, was beginning to move with purpose. She walked a little taller, spoke a little more clearly, and carried a sense of determination that had not been there before. Her mother would sometimes watch her practice, smiling quietly, while her father offered small tips about performance and stage presence. The support of her family became a foundation she could rely on. The night before the talent show, she felt a mix of excitement and fear that made it hard to sleep. She lay in bed, imagining the stage, the piano, and the audience. Thoughts of failure tried to creep in, whispering doubts and fears. But she silenced them with a thought she had practiced many times before. She played for herself. She played for the love of music. And that was enough. She replayed the notes in her mind, feeling the rhythm, the melody, and the emotions she wanted to share. The next morning she woke with a mixture of nerves and determination. She dressed carefully, wanting to feel comfortable but also prepared to face the audience. On the way to school, she clutched her music sheets tightly, thinking of every practice, session, every late night and every small victory she had experienced. She was ready to step onto the stage, even if a part of her heart still trembled with fear. At school, the atmosphere was electric. Students rushed around, preparing their performances, practicing lines, and offering last-minute encouragement to one another. Some classmates whispered about her again, but she ignored them, focusing instead on the music that had carried her through so many lonely days. She knew that this moment was hers, and that she had worked hard to reach it. When it was her turn to go on stage, her hand shook slightly as she walked toward the piano. The lights seemed brighter than she imagined, and the audience looked larger than she had pictured. But she took a deep breath, remembering the nights she had spent practicing, the guidance from her teacher, and the encouragement of her parents. Slowly, she sat down, placed her fingers on the keys, and closed her eyes for a moment. She began to play. At first, the notes were quiet, tentative, as if she were testing the waters. But gradually, the music grew stronger, more confident. Her fingers moved across the keys with precision and emotion, each note telling a story she had kept inside for so long. She did not think about the audience or the teasing. She only thought about the music, letting it flow through her like a river of sound. As she continued, the audience began to listen more closely. Whispers turned to silence. Faces that had once been skeptical now showed surprise and admiration. The girl who had been teased, who had been overlooked, was now commanding attention with her talent. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was her voice, her shield, and her triumph. By the time she finished, the room was filled with applause. The girl felt a wave of relief and joy wash over her. She had faced her fear, played from her heart, and shared her music with the world. In that moment, she realized that the teasing, the doubts, and the fear had all been part of her journey. Each challenge had made her stronger, each hurt had fueled her determination, and each practice session had prepared her for this very moment. As she stepped off the stage, her heart still racing, she knew that this was only the beginning. The talent show had given her a taste of what was possible, a glimpse of the courage that lay within her. She had learned that music was more than just notes on a page. It was a way to face the world, a way to express herself, and a way to turn fear into triumph. After the talent show, life at school did not immediately change. Some classmates whispered about her performance, but the teasing did not vanish completely. There were still those who found it easy to laugh at her, to point out her quiet ways, or to mock small mistakes she made in class. Yet, for the first time, she felt a quiet confidence growing inside her. She had faced an audience, shared her music, and survived. That small victory began to shift something deep within her, even though the applause of the talent show still echoed in her mind. The reality of school life reminded her that courage had to be nurtured every day. She continued to practice on her own, knowing that her music was a part of who she was. She did not play to impress others anymore, though she could not deny the pleasure she felt when someone acknowledged her skill. She played because it brought her peace, and slowly, she learned that the approval of others was not the measure of her worth. Her evenings at home became sacred. She would sit at the piano alone in her room, letting the notes carry her through the memories of her day. The teasing that had once made her shrink into herself now seemed smaller when measured against the music that flowed from her fingers. She began to experiment with new pieces, learning how to make her emotions speak through the keys. Some days were difficult, when the music felt stiff and unnatural, but she refused to give up. Each struggle was a chance to grow. At school, she started noticing small changes too. A few classmates who had been quiet and shy themselves began to smile at her more often. They would compliment her playing in the music room or ask her questions about what she was learning. These small gestures, though minor in the eyes of the world, meant everything to her. They reminded her that kindness could exist even in a place where ridicule had once been loud and relentless. Despite these small victories, she faced new challenges. A bigger school competition was announced, a regional music event that would gather the best young musicians from the area. The news spread quickly and excitement buzzed through the halls. For her, it was a thrilling but terrifying opportunity. She had never performed outside her school, never faced an audience of strangers who would judge her skill without knowing her story. The thought made her heart race and her stomach twist with nerves. At first, she hesitated. Could she really do it? What if she failed? What if the audience laughed at her? She remembered the talent show, and how nervous she had felt, but also how good it had felt to finish, to know that she had tried. Slowly, she realized that avoiding the competition out of fear would never allow her to grow. She wanted to challenge herself, even if it meant facing moments of discomfort. She wanted to see how far her music could reach. Her parents were supportive as always. They reminded her that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. "You have worked so hard," her mother said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "This is your chance to show yourself what you can do." Her father added, "Remember, the people in the audience may not know you, but they will hear your heart through the music. That is all that matters." Their encouragement gave her strength even as doubts lingered. She practiced harder than ever. Every evening, she would sit at the piano and repeat difficult passages, experimenting with tempo, dynamics, and emotion. She imagined the audience not as strangers but as people who might feel what she felt. She played slowly when she needed precision, and faster when the music called for energy. Each session left her exhausted but satisfied, a quiet sense of progress filling her heart. Her music teacher played a vital role during this time. They helped her refine her technique, suggesting small adjustments to make her playing more expressive. "Do not focus on perfection," the teacher said. "Focus on the story you are telling. Let the audience hear your journey, not just the notes." These words resonated deeply. She realized that music was more than technical skill. It was a way to connect, to share a piece of herself with the world. Even with careful preparation, doubts continued to creep in. Some nights she would sit at the piano and feel overwhelmed, questioning whether she was good enough. The pressure to perform perfectly made her hands shake, and she would sometimes stop playing, tears threatening to spill. But she would take a deep breath, remind herself why she loved music, and start again. Each time she persevered, she felt her confidence grow stronger, like a shield she could carry into any situation. School life also presented new challenges. Some students, jealous or insecure, would still make sly comments or laugh quietly when she walked by. She tried to ignore them, but their words sometimes pierced her heart. On particularly difficult days, she would retreat to the music room during lunch, allowing the piano to comfort her. She discovered that the music had become more than a skill. It had become a source of resilience, helping her withstand the harshness of the world outside her room. Her friendships, though few, became even more important. She spent time with those who believed in her, who offered kind words and small acts of encouragement. They would talk quietly during lunch or listen when she played a simple tune on the piano. These friendships reminded her that she was not alone, and that support could exist even in unexpected places. They helped her remember that the world was not entirely unkind, and that there were people who would celebrate her for who she was, not mock her for what she could not control. As the regional music competition approached, she faced moments of fear that tested her determination. She imagined herself on the stage in front of hundreds of people, their eyes watching every move. The thought of making a mistake in front of such a large audience made her stomach twist. But she also imagined the music flowing from her heart, the notes carrying her story to the listeners, and a sense of calm would wash over her. Music had the power to transform fear into focus, and she clung to that truth. One day during practice, she encountered a particularly difficult passage that seemed impossible to master. Her fingers stumbled repeatedly and frustration bubbled up inside her. She slammed her hands on the keys in exasperation, but then remembered the quiet nights at home, the hours of patient practice, and the small victories she had achieved so far. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and tried again. Slowly, through persistence and focus, she mastered the passage. The sense of accomplishment filled her with pride, reminding her that perseverance always led to progress. Her family continued to support her in every way they could. They would listen as she described her practice sessions, help her keep her music sheets organized, and offer words of encouragement when fear threatened to overwhelm her. "You are stronger than you think," her mother said one evening. Every challenge you face is making you ready for this moment. Her father nodded. No matter what happens, you have grown so much. That is the real victory. Their words grounded her, helping her remember that her journey was about growth, not just success. The day of the competition arrived, and nerves were high. She walked into the venue, taking in the large stage, the rows of seats, and the unfamiliar faces. Her heart raced, but she reminded herself of all the preparation that had brought her here. Every practice, every struggle, and every late night had been leading to this moment. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment, and let herself focus on the music. When it was her turn to perform, she approached the piano with a sense of calm determination. The audience watched quietly, waiting for the first note. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. At first, the notes were tentative, testing the waters, but gradually, her confidence grew. Each note carried emotion, telling a story of struggle, perseverance, and hope. The music was no longer just a skill. It was a bridge between her heart and the audience. As she continued, she could feel the connection growing. People leaned forward, listening intently. Faces that had seemed indifferent at first now showed surprise and admiration. Her music spoke louder than any words could, conveying the courage and resilience she had cultivated over years of practice and challenge. The girl who had been teased and overlooked was now commanding attention through the power of her art. By the time she finished, the hall was filled with applause. The sound was overwhelming, but in the best way possible. She felt a sense of triumph unlike anything she had ever experienced. It was not just about winning or being recognized. It was about knowing that she had faced her fears, trusted her abilities, and shared a piece of her soul with the world. That realization filled her with a quiet, unshakable confidence. As she stepped off the stage, she knew that this was only the beginning. The regional competition had shown her that courage, practice, and persistence could overcome fear and doubt. She had learned that music was more than just notes. It was a language of the heart, a way to express herself and a way to face the world with strength and grace. The challenges she had faced had not disappeared, but she had grown stronger, more resilient, and ready for whatever came next. The day of the big performance arrived, and the girl could hardly believe it. Months of practice, countless late nights, and every struggle she had faced seemed to lead to this one moment. She had performed in school before, but this was different. This was a large auditorium, filled with strangers, judges, and people who had no idea who she was. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stepped into the backstage area, where other performers were stretching, tuning instruments, and doing last-minute rehearsals. Her hands felt clammy, and she rubbed them nervously against her dress. She could hear the faint murmur of the audience, the laughter, and the shifting of seats. Her stomach twisted with nerves, but she reminded herself of all the times she had faced fear before. Every note she had practiced, every late night she had spent at the piano, and every moment she had overcome doubt was a reminder that she could do this. She was ready, even if the fear whispered otherwise. The backstage crew called her name, and it was time to go on. She walked slowly to the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding her. The auditorium seemed much larger than she had imagined, and she could see hundreds of faces staring at her, waiting for her to play. For a moment, panic threatened to take over, but she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought about her journey, the teasing, the loneliness, the hours of practice, and let that fuel her courage. She approached the piano and sat down. Her fingers hovered over the keys, and she felt the familiar connection that had been her anchor for so long. The audience was silent, waiting for the first note. She did not think about what they might say or how they might judge her. She focused only on the music, on the story she wanted to tell through every note. Slowly, she pressed the first key and the sound filled the auditorium. At first, the music was soft and tentative, like a whisper. She felt her nerves, but instead of fighting them, she let them flow through her fingers, giving the music a subtle tension that made it even more moving. Each note carried emotion, telling the story of a girl who had been teased, who had felt small and overlooked, but who had never given up. As the piece continued, her confidence grew. Her fingers moved with precision, grace, and purpose, transforming fear into beauty. The audience began to react without her even realizing it. Faces that had been skeptical now leaned forward, listening intently. Some had their mouths slightly open, surprised by the depth of emotion in her playing. She could sense the attention, the focus, but she did not let it distract her. She was in the moment, fully immersed in the music, letting it rise and fall, soar and tremble. just as she had imagined in her countless hours of practice. As the piece reached its climax, she played with all the passion she had stored inside her for years. Every wrong note, every moment of self-doubt from the past melted away. Her music filled the auditorium with energy, capturing the hearts of everyone present. She felt a connection with the audience, a silent understanding that her music was not just notes on a page. It was a story of perseverance, courage, and hope. The girls and boys who had once teased her, some of whom were in the audience, could not hide their surprise. Their smirks and whispers vanished, replaced by wide eyes and quiet astonishment. Some of them even shifted in their seats, unable to look away from the performance. They had seen her as quiet, timid, and easy to mock. But now they were witnessing a young musician who had turned every insult, every doubt, and every hurt into something beautiful. Judges in the front row nodded, clearly impressed. The piece required skill, emotion, and control, and she had delivered all three. She did not play for recognition or reward, but she could feel the acknowledgement of her talent in the silent appreciation that filled the auditorium. The music had become a bridge, carrying her story from her heart to everyone listening. She realized that the journey she had taken, the struggles, the teasing, the hours of practice had prepared her not just to play notes, but to touch hearts. As the final note faded, a moment of silence hung in the room. Then slowly, applause began to rise, building until the entire auditorium was clapping, cheering, and even standing. The girl's eyes widened, tears threatening to spill. She had expected nerves, maybe a few polite claps, but not this overwhelming response. She had done it. She had faced her fear, performed her piece, and reached the hearts of those who listened. She stood up from the piano, her legs trembling, and bowed slightly to the audience. She could hear the words of admiration, the gasps of surprise, and the whispers of awe. She had not imagined this would feel like victory, but it was. Victory not over others, but over her own doubts, fears, and struggles. She realized that the applause was not just for her music. It was for her courage, her perseverance, and the strength she had shown in continuing to play despite everything that had tried to stop her. After the performance, as she stepped off the stage, she was met by her parents in the wings. Her mother hugged her tightly, whispering, "I am so proud of you." Her father's eyes shone with pride as he said, "You faced the world today and you played your heart. That is something no one can take from you." Their words made her chest swell with warmth. She knew that their belief in her had been a part of this moment, a quiet force that had carried her through every obstacle. Her music teacher approached next, smiling broadly. "You did it," the teacher said. "I knew you could. You played not just with your fingers but with your heart." The girl felt a sense of humility mixed with pride. She realized that she had grown so much, not just as a musician but as a person. The journey that had once seemed impossible, filled with fear, doubt, and teasing, had led to a moment of triumph she would never forget. Backstage, some of the students who had teased her in the past approached cautiously. Their expressions were a mix of surprise, respect, and perhaps a little shame. "I didn't know you could play like that," one whispered. Another added, "That was really amazing." She smiled softly, feeling a quiet sense of validation. She did not need their praise to know her worth. But it was a reminder that talent and perseverance could change minds and hearts, even in those who had doubted her the most. The judges later announced the results, and she placed among the top performers. The recognition was wonderful, but the true victory was not the award. It was knowing that she had faced her fears, expressed herself fully, and left an impression on everyone who had listened. She had transformed the teasing and doubt that had once held her back into a powerful statement of courage, skill, and determination. In the days that followed, the experience continued to change her. She walked through the hallways of her school with a new sense of confidence. She no longer shrank in the shadows or allowed whispers to shake her spirit. Instead, she carried herself with quiet strength, knowing that she had proven something important, not just to others but to herself. She had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to move forward despite it. Her friends celebrated with her, sharing in the joy of her success. They talked about the performance, the music, and the courage it had taken to play. Even some classmates who had once been distant began to show respect. Slowly, she noticed that the environment around her was changing. The teasing that had once been constant became less frequent, replaced by curiosity, admiration, and even encouragement. Her music had created a ripple, spreading beyond the piano to influence the people around her. At home, the girl reflected on her journey. She remembered the countless hours of practice, the nights when she had wanted to give up, and the moments of doubt that had threatened to stop her. And now she realized that every struggle had been a stepping stone to this moment of triumph. The piano had been her companion, her teacher, and her voice, allowing her to navigate a world that had not always been kind. She continued to play every day, not for recognition or applause, but because it was a part of her. She experimented with new pieces, explored different styles, and continued to refine her technique. Music had become more than a passion. It had become a way of life, a way to express herself, and a reminder of her own strength. Each note she played carried with it the story of a girl who had been teased, who had faced fear, and who had learned to trust herself. Looking back, she realized that the teasing, the doubt, and the struggles had not been obstacles. They had been lessons. They had taught her resilience, patience, and the importance of believing in herself. They had shown her that true courage is quiet, persistent, and rooted in the heart. And as she prepared for future performances, competitions, and challenges, she knew that the lessons she had learned would stay with her forever, guiding her through every note she played. The girl who had once been overlooked, teased, and underestimated had transformed into a young musician who commanded attention, respect, and admiration. She had learned that the true triumph was not the applause or the awards. It was the courage to face fear, the dedication to pursue her passion, and the ability to express herself fully through music. She had turned every challenge into an opportunity, every doubt into determination, and every note into a statement of her strength. After the performance and the competition, life began to feel different for the girl. She had faced one of her biggest fears and had succeeded. The applause, the praise, and the admiration she had received had left a deep impression, but what stayed with her most was a quiet sense of confidence. She realized that she had grown in ways she had never imagined. The journey she had once thought was impossible had become a source of strength she could carry forward in every part of her life. At school, people began to see her differently. Those who had teased her, the ones who had once laughed at her quiet ways, now regarded her with respect. Some even approached her, asking questions about her music, complimenting her playing, or simply offering a friendly smile in the hallway. The change was gradual, but it was noticeable. She no longer felt invisible or powerless. She had learned that courage and dedication could transform not only her own life, but also the perception of those around her. Her friends celebrated her success with genuine joy. They had supported her through the teasing, and now they rejoiced in her achievement. During lunch breaks, they would talk about the competition, the performance, and the emotions it had stirred. They would laugh together, share stories, and encourage her to continue practicing and improving. These moments reminded her that support and friendship were invaluable, and that kindness could make even a difficult journey lighter. Despite the newfound admiration, she remained humble. She knew that talent alone was not enough. It was persistence, practice, and heart that had carried her to this point. She continued to practice daily, exploring new pieces and refining her technique. The piano had become more than a passion. It was a companion, a teacher, and a mirror reflecting her growth. Each note she played reminded her of the struggles she had overcome, the lessons she had learned, and the courage she had discovered within herself. At home, her parents noticed the change too. They saw their daughter standing a little taller, walking with confidence and speaking with more assurance. Her mother often watched her practice quietly, proud of the young woman she was becoming. Her father would offer gentle advice, reminding her to stay focused and to continue pursuing her dreams. Their encouragement had always been a constant presence in her life, and now it felt even more meaningful, supporting her as she moved forward into new opportunities. The girl began to understand that success was not only about recognition, but also about the impact she could have on others. She started to help younger students in the music room, teaching them simple pieces, sharing tips, and encouraging them to practice with patience and dedication. She wanted them to experience the joy that music had given her, and to understand that challenges could be overcome with effort and belief in oneself. Teaching others also reminded her of how far she had come and how much courage it had taken to reach this point. Music competitions and performances became a regular part of her life. Each event brought new challenges, new audiences, and new opportunities to grow. Some performances were easier, some were more demanding, but every time she played, she carried with her the lessons of her past. She had learned to embrace mistakes as opportunities to learn, to turn fear into focus and to let her heart guide her fingers. This approach allowed her to connect with the music in a deeper way, and the audiences she played for could feel that connection. Even outside of music, she noticed a shift in herself. She had become more confident in social situations, more willing to speak up in class, and more resilient in the face of challenges. The girl who had once been quiet and overlooked had discovered her voice, not only through the piano but in the way she carried herself every day. She realized that courage was not a one-time event, but a habit, a choice to act despite fear, and a willingness to pursue what mattered most to her. The journey had not been without setbacks. There were days when she struggled, moments when practice seemed frustrating, and times when the pressures of school and music felt overwhelming. But she had learned to face these moments with patience and determination. She reminded herself that growth was a process, not a destination, and that the struggles she had faced were part of what had made her stronger. Each challenge became an opportunity to prove to herself that she could persevere. Her peers continued to change as well. Some of the students who had been jealous or dismissive now showed admiration, while others who had been indifferent became curious about her music. She learned that people's attitudes could shift, and that kindness and talent could inspire respect and friendship. She also realized that she no longer needed to seek validation from others. Her confidence came from knowing her own worth and staying true to herself. One day she was asked to perform at a school assembly. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness, but she knew she was ready. As she played, she saw the same reactions she had witnessed before: the surprise, the admiration, and the quiet attention of the audience. This time, however, she was not only performing for herself, she was performing for those who might be struggling with doubt, fear, or teasing, just as she had once struggled. Her music became a message of hope, showing that persistence and courage could transform challenges into triumphs. The girl also began composing her own pieces. She experimented with melodies, harmonies, and rhythms, discovering that her own creativity could express emotions and stories in ways that went beyond the notes of traditional pieces. Composing became a personal journey, allowing her to reflect on her experiences, her triumphs, and her growth. Through composition, she realized that music was not only about skill, but also about expression, storytelling, and connection. Over time, she became an inspiration to others. Younger students looked up to her, teachers recognized her dedication, and peers respected her talent. She had transformed from a quiet, teased girl into a confident young musician, someone who had faced fear, overcome obstacles, and achieved a sense of fulfillment that went beyond applause. Her journey showed that perseverance, practice, and self-belief could create real change, not only in one's own life but also in the lives of others. Even in her personal life, she noticed the impact of her growth. She became more empathetic, understanding the struggles of others and offering support where she could. She learned to listen, to encourage, and to lead by example. Her experiences with teasing and doubt had taught her compassion, and she used that compassion to create connections and foster kindness wherever she went. Her parents continued to be proud, not just of her music but of the person she had become. They saw a young woman who had faced fear, embraced her talent, and grown stronger with every challenge. They watched her balance school, music, and friendships with grace, and they knew that she had learned lessons that would serve her for a lifetime. Their pride was quiet, steady, and deeply felt, a reflection of the journey they had supported from the very beginning. As the years went on, the girl continued to play, perform, and grow. Music remained at the center of her life, a source of joy, expression, and courage. She faced new challenges, new competitions, and new audiences, but each time she carried with her the lessons of her past. The girl who had been teased and overlooked had learned that true strength came from within, and that perseverance, heart, and passion could overcome almost any obstacle. Looking back, she understood that the teasing, the loneliness, and the doubts had not defined her, they had shaped her. They had taught her resilience, patience, and the importance of staying true to herself. She realized that the real triumph was not just the applause, awards, or recognition, but the courage to continue, the ability to persevere, and the joy of sharing her heart through music. Her story became a quiet inspiration, a reminder to others that even in the face of ridicule and doubt, it was possible to rise above, to find strength, and to achieve something beautiful. She had turned every moment of fear into an opportunity for growth, every note into a statement of courage, and every performance into a celebration of her journey. In the end, the girl who had once been teased had found her voice, not only through the piano but in life itself. She had learned that success was measured not by what others thought, but by the courage to pursue one's passion, the dedication to improve, and the willingness to share one's heart. Her journey showed that even the quietest, most overlooked individuals could achieve great things when they embraced their gifts and faced their fears. And so, she continued to play, to practice, and to grow, carrying with her the lessons of perseverance, the joy of music, and the quiet power of courage. The girl who had once been mocked, ignored, and doubted had become a symbol of hope, determination, and triumph. Through music, she had found herself, and in finding herself, she had discovered that the true power of life lay in never giving up, no matter the obstacles, and in always letting one's heart speak, note by note, to the world.